Hi guys, this is a hopefully quick video about LS 2.1 and 2.3. We're talking about energy's impact in an ecosystem. So know that there are 5 levels to environmental organization. The first level is our biggest. It's the biosphere. This is the region on the surface of the earth, in the atmosphere, and in the bodies of water where living organisms live. A biome is a formation of plants and animals that have common characteristics due to similar climates and can be found over a range of continents. So these are our big areas that have similar biotic and abiotic components, like rainforest, desert, tundra, temperate deciduous forest. We'll talk about these more later. An ecosystem is a community of living organisms called producers, consumers, decomposers, biotic and abiotic components. So in this one, we've got fish and turtles and shrimp and insects and plants, but we also have the water and the sunlight and the air and the clouds and the dirt. All of those things together make an ecosystem. The next is a community. These are just the living organisms in an area. So we have lots of different populations of organisms living together, and that makes a community. And we move to a population. This is a group of one specific type of organism. So if you have 20 dogs, you have a population of dogs. If you have 3 fish, you have a small population of fish. In our classroom, we have a population of humans. And the last level, which is the smallest, is an individual. This is one living thing, and we call that an organism. In an ecosystem, organisms can be grouped by how they get energy. They'll be grouped in 3 categories. They're either going to be a producer, a consumer, or a decomposer. Producers are the way energy enters our ecosystem. So energy comes to Earth in the form of light energy. Plants absorb that light energy and they transform it into food. They turn it into sugars through a process called photosynthesis. And then when other organisms eat our producers, which are typically plants, then the energy moves into another organism, and this is going to be passed through organisms throughout an ecosystem. Typically, our producers are plants, but they can be algae, they can be bacteria, there's some coral, it could be phytoplankton. Anything that's going to use photosynthesis to produce its own food is a producer. Consumers are pretty much everybody else. Anything that actually eats, it consumes another organism to get its energy is a consumer. And our last group is a decomposer. They break down dead organisms to get their energy, and in doing so, they break apart organisms into all the other tiny little parts like their nutrients and water, and they enter it back into the soil so that it can be absorbed by plants, and we can start those nutrients moving back through the ecosystem. So decomposers are kind of our recycling group. They get things back into the system after they've worked their way into other organisms. A food chain is just one single line of energy transfer in an ecosystem. You're going to know how the energy is flowing by following the arrows. So in this picture, the energy from the flower goes to the caterpillar. It goes from the caterpillar to the frog, from the frog to the snake, and then from the snake to the owl. So follow the arrow. That's the direction the energy is flowing. And a food chain is just one direct path of the energy flow in an ecosystem. We have something called trophic levels, and for a lot of you this year, this was probably new. We talk about each level in a food chain or even a food web in trophic levels. So level 1 is our producers, typically plants. Remember, that's where the energy enters the ecosystem. Level 2 are animals that eat plants, and those are herbivores. We call them primary consumers. Primary means 1. Level 3, animals that eat herbivores, and some animals that eat herbivores and plants. So we have secondary consumers, which can be omnivores and carnivores. Level 4 on our pyramid are animals that eat carnivores, and we call these tertiary consumers. They're totally carnivorous. And then there's actually a tip-top point on the pyramid, and those are quaternary consumers. They're apex predators. They're carnivores. They eat other animals, and nothing really eats them. But then decomposers sit to the side, and everybody, no matter if they are a producer all the way up to our apex predators, eventually they'll all die, and they get recycled back into the ecosystem by our decomposers. A food web is a lot of food chains that interconnect. So you can see over here that we've got a food web, and there are lots of arrows and coming to and from different organisms. Don't get confused. Always remember that at the base of any food web, food chain, or energy pyramid, we start with producers, and then we work up into each level after that, and you can match the flow of energy by following the arrow. I do want you to look at the pyramid and remember that at the bottom of the pyramid, we're going to start with 100% of the energy that plants were able to convert from sunlight into sugar. But only 10% of that energy moves up to the next level to my primary consumers. They're only able to get about 10% of that energy out. Some of that energy is lost in chewing, trying to digest, and to break apart those fibrous parts of a producer. But just getting the energy out of the producer, only 10% makes it into our primary consumer group. Again, 10% is all that's going to make it up to this top. But now we're talking about 10% of 10%. So 1% makes it up to my secondary consumers. And again, it's lost in body heat, digestion, chewing, movement. Energy is lost from our primary consumers. So only 1% of that original energy makes it up to this level. And then again, only 10% of that, so 0.1% makes it up to my apex predators. You can see that less energy is making it up each level of the energy pyramid because the population is getting smaller. You have to have a bigger base of producers to support an ecosystem than you do primary consumers, and then an even smaller group of secondary consumers, and then the smallest population of our tertiary consumers up here, or quaternary. Because if you flip this pyramid upside down and you had apex predators at the bottom, our pyramid would be totally unstable and it would collapse and crash. Each level is dependent on the next, and it's important that we have a bigger base of producers and smaller groups as we move up the energy pyramid, up the trophic levels, so that we can keep balance in our ecosystem. We talked about food webs, but here's another picture. You can see the producers again are at the bottom. We have primary consumers, secondary consumers, and then our tertiary consumer at the top. Law of conservation of energy goes back to that idea that energy is not created or destroyed. So if we lose energy through body heat, through movement, through digestion, just through chewing, that energy can't make it up to the next level. So again, as we move up the energy pyramid, less energy is making it up through the pyramid because we're not creating energy. It's not being destroyed either. It's just being transformed into things like kinetic movement energy and thermal energy, which is like heat energy. Let's review a limiting factor. A limiting factor is a resource so scarce that it limits the size of a population. So water in a desert, food in Antarctica, shelter in a forest, or sunlight in the rainforest. Those factors limit the size a population can grow to because they're necessary for life. We have something called carrying capacity. This is the largest population an environment can support. So it is the capacity, that's the maximum amount that the ecosystem can carry. I'm going to do one more slide. I want you to look at this chart. You can see the number or the population is going up the side. You have time across the bottom. You can see that a population grows and grows until it hits that maximum point, and you'll often see a wiggly line across the top, and this is our carrying capacity. I hope this video helps. Make sure you ask questions if you don't understand anything you're seeing on this video or anything